How's it going, guys? So in today's video, I will be doing part 2 of the winners and losers of the MLB offseason. And if you guys already have not watched part 1, then I recommend that you guys should do so. These rankings are not in order and just my opinion. Anyway, let's get into the video. Alright, so in my opinion, the New York Mets are winners this offseason. Overall, I think the Mets probably had the second best offseason behind the San Diego Padres. While there was some controversy regarding the front office, they made a smooth transition by hiring Zach Scott. And now, where to begin with these guys? New owner Steve Cohen quickly took over the team and turned them from being laughingstock of the National League to playoff contenders. So at the start of the offseason, they retained free agent starter Marcus Stroman via qualifying offer. Stroman was ranked by many major sports outlets as the second or third best pitcher on the market. Then in December, they made two big moves in signing relievers Trevor May and catcher James McCann. With the McCann signing, they quickly addressed their biggest need of the offseason. And I get it, JT Realmuto is better than McCann, but in many stats, McCann is not too far behind. Take this for example. In 2019 to 2020, Realmuto had a slash line of 273, 333, and 492 with an 825 OPS. From that same period of time, McCann has had a slash line of 276, 334, and 474 with an 808 OPS plus. So Realmuto is indeed better than McCann, but if McCann performs, then the Mets got a bargain. Later in early January, the Mets made a stunning trade to acquire Indian shortstop Francisco Lindor and starting pitcher Carlos Carrasco. Now, the Mets did lose young infielders Ahmed Rosario and Andres Jimenez, along with prospects Isaiah Green and Josh Wolf. But the Mets are in win-now mode, and Lindor is definitely worth it. Now, Lindor will be a free agent next offseason, unless the Mets extend him, so they definitely should try to. And Carrasco isn't half bad either. During his whole career, he has been very solid and a reliable starter. Last season, he had a 2.91 earned run average and 82 strikeouts. In this trade, the Mets fulfilled two big needs. Also, acquiring Joey Lucchesi in the Joe Musgrove trade is a very solid move if they can tap into his potential. While those were the marquee moves of the offseason, they were smart to retain relievers Brad Brock and Devin Betances, as well as signing Jose Peraza, Brandon Drury, and Malik Smith, and acquiring Jordan Yamamoto, among others, gives the Mets some much-needed depth they did not have before. And while Kevin Pillar and Albert Almora Jr. aren't George Springer, the Mets front office definitely sees something in them, and hopefully they can succeed. This offseason is even better when you take into account that the only impact players they lost were Steven Matz and Wilson Ramos, whom the Mets easily replaced. The front office revamped the Major League team and turned them into contenders, along with acquiring some solid prospects. Now, the Mets did not get Trevor Bauer, George Springer, or JT Realmuto, and while that is disappointing, you have to realize that there are still many great moves that they did, and they did not get locked into a huge contract. And overall, this was a great offseason for the Mets. Now, in my opinion, the Angels were one of the losers of this offseason. But yes, they did make some smart moves. Acquiring Jose Quintana, Jose Iglesias, Dexter Fowler, Alex Cobb, and Raisel Iglesias were good moves. What makes them losers this offseason, though, is that they could have done much more. Now for the Angels, it seems like since Mike Trout has made his debut, each offseason the Angels have needed pitching. Now the Angels have some good pitchers on their roster, but the issue is that 1, they don't have good depth. 2, their pitchers seem to get hurt a lot. And 3, many of them have low ceilings. So it seemed like this offseason was the time to reinvent the rotation and get pitchers like Trevor Bauer, Jake Odorizzi, Masahiro Tanaka, or even Sonny Gray. In turn, they got Jose Quintana and Alex Cobb. Now don't get me wrong, Cobb and Quintana are good additions. They add depth, experience, and can provide innings for the Angels. The issue is that they added no one else besides Raisel Iglesias, who is probably their best equation of the offseason, and he will definitely help their bullpen. Not to mention that Quintana hasn't been his all-star level since 2018, and Cobb has only had one decent season in 3 years with the Orioles. Overall, the Angels needed to do more and add. On the offensive side for the Angels, adding Jose Iglesias is a solid move, as he replaces Andrelton Simmons, and they didn't give up any good prospects. Adding Kurt Suzuki and Dexter Fowler aren't half bad moves either, as both can fulfill solid need for the Angels and be decent. In the bullpen, Alex Claudio and Aaron Sleekers helped replace Hansel Robles and Keenan Middleton. The Angels did not lose many impact players this offseason besides Andrelton Simmons. So the Angels did not have a half-bad offseason, but they have Mike Trout and they are in a win-now mode. Not to mention that the Astros and our Athletics are good but not great, and if the Angels added an impact piece or two, they could beat them. If they did more and focused on the pitching, they easily could have been in the winners category for this offseason. The Toronto Blue Jays were one of the winners this offseason. Among their most notable moves were signing George Springer, signing Marcus Semien, and signing Kirby Yates. The Blue Jays went into the offseason fresh off a playoff appearance. They hardly needed to do anything, yet they did a bunch. Now, they only made 3 marquee moves, but they were extremely solid moves. They hardly needed anyone as their roster was almost set, and their players are young and will get better as they age into their primes. By signing George Springer, they landed the 3rd best free agent on the market and a veteran that has experience in the playoffs. And in signing Marcus Semien, the Jays got a guy who finished in 3rd place in MVP voting in 2019. While he did struggle last season, the Blue Jays banked that he would turn it around by signing him to a nice rebound contract. Now, while the rest of the moves that they made were not as significant, they still are beneficial. Like Semien, by signing Kirby Yates, they add a once-dominant closer to their pen in hopes that he rebounds. Likewise, with signing Tyler Chatwood and Robbie Ray in hopes that they can rebound and turn back to their once-dominant selves. Overall, while they did not make many moves, they brought in 2 MVP-caliber players to an already dominant team. So the Colorado Rockies made the loser list for 2 reasons, and one reason is that they traded Nolan Arenado, and the second reason is they really didn't do anything else. When you trade a franchise legend without getting a huge haul, you will usually end up on the loser list. Now don't get me wrong, I'm glad the Rockies traded Arenado. At their best, they had a core of Arenado, Trevor Story, German Marquez, and Charlie Blackmon, who are all really good. However, they did not have many players surrounding their core, and that is why they failed. And the Rockies were never going to succeed this season, as both the Dodgers and the Padres were projected by some projection systems to each finish this season with over 100 wins. So I'm glad they traded Arenado because they were never going to contend. However, the return they received wasn't great, but you have to realize that they were never going to get a premier prospect because of how long Arenado's contract is, and that is a long time for a team to commit to a player. The return disappointed me a bit though because all of the prospects that they acquired have more risk than normal prospects. But after the trade, general manager Jeff Bridich stated that if they were rebuilding, they would have traded many players earlier. So if they aren't rebuilding, then what the heck are they doing? This indecisiveness of not deciding between rebuilding and not is why the Rockies are losers this offseason. They could have made many good trades this offseason as many teams had potential needs that were not filled. Their offseason additions were as well as they did not sign a single player to a major league contract. Their minor league signing additions were Chris Owings, Jose Prezino, Greg Bird, CJ Cron, and Derek Rodriguez. Now, these aren't half bad minor league signings, but they did nothing else, and the front office and ownership somehow believe that the team will contend. The only major league additions that they made so far is swapping Jeff Hoffman for Robert Stevenson, who both need a change of scenery, and drafting Jordan Sheffield in the Rule 5 draft, who has control issues. Indecisiveness is the main reason the Rockies are losers in this list. So this is a team that not many people would consider as a team that won the offseason, but in my mind they did. And this team is the Texas Rangers. Now don't get me wrong, I don't expect the Rangers to contend next year or even finish in the top 3 of their division. But what I like about their offseason was they built for the future and signed some low-risk, high-reward players. These low-risk, high-reward players are David Dahl, Kohei Arihara, Mike Foltynewicz, and Brock Holt. Besides Arihara, who came from overseas this offseason, all of these guys have been all-stars in their career and are relatively young. If these guys can produce how they did when they were all-stars, then the Rangers are in a great position to extend them or trade them for prospects. Not to mention that these players can help coach the younger Rangers prospects as they make the big leagues. And the Rangers made some very nice trades as well. Starting off when they traded Lance Lynn in exchange for prospects Dane Dunning and Avery Weems. Dunning made his debut last season and pitched to a solid 3.97 earned run average and 35 strikeouts in 34 innings. Dunning now ranks as the Rangers' third best prospect, and he projects as a very solid middle-of-the-rotation pitcher. In the Rule 5 draft, they drafted Dodgers prospect Red Gus, who could be a solid option for the Rangers next season. They traded closer Rafael Montero to the Mariners in exchange for 17-year-old prospect Jose Corniel, who could rise quickly through the prospect ranks in a year or two. And in the Elvis Andrus trade, they acquired veteran slugger Chris Davis, who is going to be fun to watch with Joey Gallo. And they also acquired Jonah Heim and Dane Aker in the trade as well. Heim is now the Rangers' 26th prospect and could start the year with them. And in the Nate Lowe trade, while they did give up 3 solid prospects, in return they got a very solid and young first baseman, who with a few mechanical changes could be great. Lowe was not useful to the Rays because of the insane depth on their team. While those were the premier moves, they also signed relievers Nick Vincent, Justin Anderson, Sam Gavlujo, and Spencer Patton to minor league deals. And on the offensive side, they signed Charlie Culberson, Drew Butera, and Jason Martin to minor league deals. Of course, these are just minor league deals, but I think they could pay off well. Now, for the Rangers offseason, it ranks among one of the worst for winners this offseason, but they still had a great offseason. And no, they probably won't make the playoffs next season, but I really enjoyed watching their offseason and all the moves they made. This is a team that is quietly putting together a pretty good farm system, and this offseason helped get their future teams even better. And last, but certainly not least, is the St. Louis Cardinals. Now, the Cardinals are in the winners section for one reason and one reason only. And that reason is the Cardinals trade for all-star third baseman Nolan Arenado. Now, re-signing Adam Wainwright and Yadier Molina were definitely smart moves, but the Arenado trade takes the cake. Now, the Cardinals did give up Austin Gomber, Alaris Montero, Tony Locey, Mateo Gil, and Jake Sommers, but the only player that could have made an impact this year is Gomber, who is definitely a good pitcher, but the Cardinals have enough pitching depth. And while the Cardinals did take on Arenado's large contract, the Rockies paid $50 million of it, and not to mention that if Arenado produces anywhere near where he did it with his time with the Rockies, then the Cardinals are winners for a long time. While really they only made one major move, this was a move that puts them ahead of the other competitors in their division. The National League Central was very quiet this offseason, and while their fellow division rivals have added a few pieces in the last few weeks, their moves hardly moved the needle, and the Cardinals went into the offseason as probably the best team in the Central, and by adding Arenado, that puts them ahead of the others. And there is some inherent risk that Arenado might struggle with his hitting outside of Coors Stadium, but I don't think that will happen. Overall, this was a very good trade for the Cardinals. And re-signing veterans Adam Wainwright and Yadier Molina were good moves as well. Of course, they're no longer the players they once were, but each put up a solid season in 2020. And bringing them back, even just for the fans, makes it a good offseason for the Cardinals, who put themselves out of their opponents in their division. If you guys have enjoyed this video, then please like and subscribe, and tell me what you think of these teams' off seasons in the comments section below. Thanks for watching.